And then thirdly, listening. So, third aspect of good communication is listening. Good listening is essential for good communication. Jazz is the music of listening and responding. If you really watch what we're doing up here, hopefully if we're good, and we know what we're doing, and we've got that song form internalized, we can really dial into what everyone else is doing around us. One of my teachers in college, talking about this form, said there's 3 rules for the jazz combo: listening, listening, and listening. And that's pretty much it. It should be, if I'm not in touch with what's going on around me, how can I expect to contribute anything significant, right? It'd be like a conversation where I'm always changing the subject. And the conversation can't progress. It'd be like my buddy Jay. He'd say to me, what did you think of that game last night? And I'd say to him, man, I love to eat cake. He'd say, no, did you hear what I'm saying? Did you watch the game last night? It was great. And I'd be like, man, that is a great shirt. And it was just like, what? There's no connection. He'd be always wondering, like, are you even listening to what I'm saying, right? So for this thing to work, there has to be like this web of listening is what I call it. So these two are dialed into me, James and I are dialed into Zeb, and Zeb and I are dialed into James. And we've got this web, you know what I'm saying? Those connections are all, those points of contact intermingled. And so we have that tight togetherness. It's a picture of unity. We're all connected through the humble service of listening to each other musically. So it's like a dance. We organically evolve and feel out each other's subtle rhythms and tones and musical phrases. So we got this, through this give and take of mutual submission through listening, often what's created is far greater. Because I'm listening to these guys, and they've got something unique to say. So that informs what I'm going to say, right? So something is created that's far greater than what could be composed in isolation, right? And Wynton Marsalis has a great quote about this. He says, the real power and innovation of jazz is that a group of people can come together and create art, improvised art, and can negotiate their agendas with each other. And that negotiation is the art. Invariably, they're going to play something that you would not play. So you have to learn when to say a little something and when to get out of the way. But you're always negotiating. Who are you going to go with? You're going to go with the piano, you know where the drums are, and so you have that question of integrity, the intent, and the will to play together. That's what jazz music is. So you have yourself, your individual expression, and then you have to figure out how to fit in with everybody else. The humility of listening that I'm talking about, that's how we figure out how to fit in with everybody else. There's a real gospel-centered value in listening. James 1:19 says, be quick to hear and slow to speak. As you guys probably all know, being a good listener is one of the quickest ways to establish healthy relationships. So why is that? Because when you're not talking and actually listening, you're communicating very strongly. The fact that I'm not talking communicates something, right? Listening communicates, and it speaks out a loud message of humility. And humility is the centerpiece of the gospel, is a centerpiece of the gospel. So when I listen to what someone else has to say, it non-verbally communicates that I value the person and the content of their words, right? Implicitly, a message is sent that what you have to say is more important than what I want to say. It enacts Philippians 2, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. So in community, when we manifest this verse together, when I'm a listener and also the one being listened to, there's a gospel-centered give and take that you'll see up here modeled, and hopefully is modeled in our churches and our relationships, that unites us in relationships, right? So as Christians, are we listening to those around us who are hurting and needy? Like this jazz group, my ability to communicate something meaningful may only go so far as good of a listener as I am. If I'm listening well and really listening, then I can maybe give a point of contact to the gospel. But I've got to be able to listen well. Bonhoeffer has a significant quote about this. Just as our love for God begins with listening to God's word, The beginning of love for other Christians is learning to listen to them. God's love for us is shown by the fact that God not only gives us God's word, but also lends us God's ear. We do God's work for our brothers and sisters when we learn to listen to them. So often Christians, especially preachers, think that their only service is always to have to offer something when they're together with other people. They forget that listening can be a greater service than speaking. Many people seek a sympathetic ear and do not find it among Christians, because these Christians are talking even when they should be listening. But Christians who can no longer listen to one another will soon no longer be listening to God either. They will always be talking even in the presence of God. The death of the spiritual life starts here, and in the end, there's nothing left but empty spiritual chatter and clerical condescension, which chokes on pious words. Those who cannot listen long and patiently will always be talking past others, and finally no longer will even notice it. Those who think their time is too precious to spend listening will never really have time for God and others, but only for themselves, for their own words and plans. So as we play this next tune, I'm going to play the melody by myself the first time, and then we'll play the whole thing again, and the band will come in. And ask yourself this: what's more interesting, me playing by myself, or us playing as a collective whole? See if you can see something Trinitarian going on there. Listen how we use the jazz language, and look for the interaction that may stem from intentional listening. It may be found not in what we do play, but in the space that we give, and what we don't play. So listen for how we're listening and for how we communicate.